Good morning, my dear students. In the last class, we have studied about nutrition in plants, part 1. In that first chapter, we have discussed about how plants will prepare the food and how plants will be utilize the food. Okay, so we are completed how autotrophics, living organism, they will prepare the food, and how autotrophic plants, they are utilizing the food. That is what we have seen that. Okay, so in this class that I am going to do that, continuing the chapter nutrition in plants. Nutrition in plants. Nutrition in plants, part 2. Part 2. Okay, so now we will going to study that how, because already I told you that plants basically they will prepare the food, but not all the plants they will prepare the food. Okay, so maximum plants, that means only green plants they can able to prepare the food by their own. What about non-green plants? That non-green plants we can call it as heterotrophic plants. So in this class today we will going to discuss how these heterotrophic plants they will get the food and how they will going to utilize it. Okay, so we will going to start with heterotrophic plants. Heterotrophic plants. Okay, so heterotrophic plants. What do you mean by heterotrophic plants? Those living organisms, they will depend the food on other living organisms. Such living organisms we can call it as heterotrophic plants. Means heterotrophic living organisms. Suppose if you are talking about in animals, human beings are also heterotrophic living organisms. Okay, like microorganisms are also heterotrophic living organisms. Like that, if you want to see in plants, I am talking about plants. In plants also, certain plants are heterotrophic plants. That means those plants, they cannot prepare food by their own, but they can depend food on other living organisms. Okay, so such plants we can call it as heterotrophic plants. So we will going to see that heterotrophic plants. Okay, so after understanding about heterotrophic plants, we will going to discuss about a classification of heterotrophic plants. Okay, everyone understood what is an heterotrophic plants? Those living organisms or those plants, they will depend food for other plants or other living organisms. Such plants we can call it as heterotrophic plants. Okay, so in plants itself there are 4 category of heterotrophic plants. You can see that. So that is classification of heterotrophic plants. Heterotrophic plants. Okay, so we will going to see that classifications. There are 4. The first one is parasitic plant. This also one type of heterotrophic plants. And second one is saprotrophic plant. Saprotrophic plants is also one kind of heterotrophic plants. And third one we can call it as insectivorous plants. Insectivorous plants. This is also another classification of plants. And the next one is symbiotic plants. This also generally we can consider as a heterotrophic plants. Okay, so coming to the parasitic plants. What is parasitic plants means? Parasitic plants means certain living organism, they cannot prepare the food. Suppose parasitic plants, this we can call it as non-green plant. That means they don't have that chlorophyll in it. They doesn't have the chlorophyll in it. So then if they don't have the chlorophyll in it, so those plants they cannot prepare the food, right? So this particular plants, how they will get the food then? So this particular plant, they will depend food on other plants. That means these parasitic plants, suppose example if you are taking that Cuscuta plant, or else you can call it as Amarbel plants. So this Cuscuta plant, it's a yellow in color. Okay, this particular plant, it will attach with the green plants. Whenever you can see, even in our campus also it is this Cuscuta plant. So this yellow color plants, basically what it will happens, it will stick on to the another plant. Okay, so when it will stick on to the another plant, so whatever that another plants will prepare the food, this particular plant will be absorbing the nutrient. Did you understand what I am saying that? Okay, this Cuscuta plant basically they cannot prepare the food, so they will grow in the another plants. Okay, so then this plant body, it will be stick on to the another plant. So from the another plant, it will prepare the food. That food will be absorbed by the Cuscuta plant, and that is how the Cuscuta plants will be survived. Okay, so Cuscuta plants, or else you can call it as Amarbel plants. Okay, is the example of parasitic plant. So how do we define the parasitic plant? Those plants, they will depend food for another plants. Okay, and from that they absorb the nutrient and survive. Such kind of plants we can call it as parasitic plants. Okay, example Cuscuta plants or Amarbel plants. Okay, so after understanding about parasitic plants, let us move on to saprophytic plants. What do you mean by saprophytic plants? Saprophytic plants means what? Those plants or those living organisms, they will depend food on dead and decayed matters. Such living organisms we can call it as saprophytic plants. Example, you can take mushroom. Okay, yeast you can take. Yeast is a microorganisms which will come under the plant category only. That saprophytic plants you can take. Mushroom you can take. Okay, mushroom. Mushrooms we can take. Okay, then you can take that fungus also you can take. The fungus also you can take that from the fungi also you can take. So yeast, mushrooms, fungi, these all are saprophytic plants, because basically these plants or these microorganisms basically they will depend the food on dead and decayed matter. So how they will going to get that food? So that means basically these living organisms, it will be present in dead and decayed matters. Okay, so then these living organisms, they are releases some juice. They are releases some juice, and that juice basically it dissolve that dead and decayed matter. After dissolving that dead and decayed matter, okay, so then it will going to absorb those nutrients. Did you understand how they are going to get that food for saprophytic plants? So the saprophytic plants basically, like mushroom if you are talking about, like fungus if you are talking about, these particular living organisms, they are releases some fluid in the dead and decayed matter. Then that fluid basically dissolve the dead and decayed matter, and when it is dissolved that, so obviously it releases the nutrient, and that nutrients are utilized by saprophytic plants. Understood now what is in saprophytic plants? So saprophytic plants are those plants, they will depend food on dead and decayed matter. Such living organisms we can call it as saprophytic plants. These saprophytic plants also you can call it as non-green plants. Okay, this also one of the example for heterotrophic plants. So after this we can move to that next, insectivorous plants. So insectivorous plants also we can call it as heterotrophic plants, because these particular plants, they depend food for insects. So what they will do, these insectivorous plants, they have a sacs-like structures in their body. Okay, and these sacs-like structures was covered by lid. Okay, so what will happen? These particular plants, when it is blossom, okay, it shows some colorful things in that. So in the lid, so what will happen when it is showing the colorful things in the lid so that insects will be attracted towards this plant and the insects will come and sit on the lid. So when insects will come and sit, so this plants basically it will capture the insects. So after capture the insects, so it will going to be digested and it will going to be utilized. Okay, so insectivorous plants also they will depend the food for insects or other living organisms. Okay, so insectivorous also we can call it as heterotrophic plants. So what do you mean by insectivorous plants? Insectivorous plants are those plants they will depend food on insects or other living organisms. Such plants we can call it as insectivorous plants. Like examples, picture plants you can call it as, it's an example of insectivorous plants. Okay, understood everyone? What is an insectivorous plants? Okay, so after understanding about that insectivorous plants, next if you are move on to symbiotic plants. So what do you mean by symbiotic plants? Symbiotic plants means what? Suppose two living organisms are there, two plants are, imagine suppose if you are talking about algae, okay, and fungi. Okay, so this algae and fungi they will grow together. Sometimes they are grow together. So when they are grow together, that means one of the plants it will attach with the another plants. Like algae is growing fungi. So then what is the, why we can call it as these plants, we can call it as symbiotic plants. These plants basically what it will happen is, one plant it provide the nutrients to another plant and another plants it provide the shelter to these plants. That means a mutual understanding between two plants. Okay, they are exchanging the nutrients between two plants. So any two plants they are exchanging their nutrients and they are providing the shelter to one to the another. So such kind of plants we can call it as symbiotic plants. Their relations we can call it as symbiotic relations. Okay, so example you can take algae and fungi. Algae and fungi. These two plants are grown together, we can call it as lichen plants. Algae and fungi are together, we can call it as lichen plants. So this lichen plants we can consider as symbiotic plants. Basically what will happen is, this algae it will prepare the food. This food it will give to the fungi. Okay, so what fungi will give to the algae? So fungi basically it will give moisture to the algae, because algae if you want to grow it requires lot of moisture. So the fungi will give the moisture to the algae. So algae will give the nutrients to the fungi. This is a mutual exchange of nutrients between one plant to the another. So such kind of plants we can call it as symbiotic plants. So in this symbiotic also we can consider as it will comes under heterotrophic, because algae is preparing the food, but whereas fungi is what we can call it as heterotrophic. So in that way we are considering that. Okay, understood? So what is heterotrophic plants? Those plants they will depend food on other living organisms or other plants. So such living organisms we can call it as heterotrophic plants. Example of heterotrophic plants such as parasitic plants, saprophytic plants, insectivorous plants, symbiotic plants. These are the example of heterotrophic plants. Next, coming to the classification of heterotrophic plants. Basically heterotrophic plants are classified into four types. One is parasitic plants, saprotrophic plants, insectivorous plants and symbiotic plants. These are the four types of heterotrophic plants. Okay, so already we know that parasitic plants means what? Parasitic plants are those plants they will depend food on another plants from the host. Okay, that means these particular plants they will stick on to the another plants, and from the another plants is preparing the food, and that food is absorbed by this particular plant. Okay, example Cascata plant will be the example of parasitic plants. The another name of Cascata plant is Amarvel plants. Okay, so next coming to the saprophytic plants means what? Those plants they will depend food on dead and decayed matter. Such plants we can call it as saprotrophic plants. Example is mushroom, fungi will be the example. These particular plants, they are releases digestive juice and dead and decayed matter, and dead and decayed matter will be dissolved with the help of digestive juice, and then it will absorb the nutrient. Then insectivorous plants. Insectivorous plants means those plants they depend food on insects. Okay, such plants we can call it as insectivorous plants. Example, pitcher plants we can give. Okay, that last one you can call it as symbiotic plants. What is in symbiotic plants? So symbiotic plants are those plants they will exchange, that means two plants or two or more plants, they will exchange their nutrients and shelter from one to another. Okay, such plants we can call it as symbiotic plants. That relations we can call it as symbiotic relations. Example, lichens. Okay, and also you can see that many times fungi are grown in green plants. Okay, so whereas green plants they will prepare the food and they will use to the fungi, and fungi will use the moisture content to the particular plant. Okay, so hope so everyone is understand this concept. So next we will move on to that. The last topic from this chapter. The last topic from this chapter we are going to see. Okay, the last one. Soil repletion. Soil repletion. Soil replacement. That means basically that soil also what we can call it as, because that soil basically provides nutrients to the plants. So every times we need to what we can call it as repletion of the soil. Repletion of the soil means what? Basically we can call it as the soil should be increase the nutrient. How we can increase the nutrient in the soil? How we can increase the nutrient in the soil? We can increase that nutrient by increasing in the microbes. Suppose if the soil contain more microorganisms, so what will happen? Example, Rhizobium Microorganism. Basically these Rhizobium microorganisms, whatever that the dead and decayed matters are surrounding atmospheric nitrogen. These gases it will take, it will convert it into nutrients. Okay, in that way these microorganisms will become helpful for to increase the nutrients in the soil. Increasing the nutrient in the soil we can call it as soil replenishment. Okay, so this it happens by microorganisms. Okay, because what will happen when we are growing the crops in the field continuously, the soil will lose its fertility. Okay, so then what will happen? So in that particular place we cannot grow that the healthy plants. So then what will happen? So to increase that, what will happen? We have to allow that microorganisms should be grown. Microorganisms should be increases in that soil. So in a such a way that we have to loosen the soil. We have to do. If you are doing in such a way that what will happen? That more microbes will be increases in the soil. So when that microbes are increasing in the soil, then what will happen? That those microbes it converts that atmospheric nitrogen and then it will convert it into nutrients. Okay, these nutrients will become helpful for the plants to grow. Okay, so soil replenishment means that increasing soil fertility. Okay, increasing soil fertility. How we can increase the soil fertility? We can increase the soil fertility by with the help of microorganisms. We can say that. Okay, understood now? So hope so that nutrition in plants chapter is completed now. So chapter is completed now. So once again I will repeat that what are the concepts we have completed in this chapter. In this chapter we have focused on how plants are, the plants are also living organisms, plants are also require food. Okay, so how plants will get the food, or how plants will prepare the food, and after preparing the food, how plants will going to be utilize the food. So I told you there are 5 nutrients are essential for every living organism, such as carbohydrates, protein, fat, minerals and vitamins. These are the 5 essential nutrients are necessary for plants also, necessary for the animals also. And in this particular chapter, in nutrition in plants, we have studied that how plants will going to be prepare the food and how it will going to be utilized. Then after that we have studied that classification of plants. So basically that plants we are classified into autotrophic plants and heterotrophic plants. And autotrophic plants means those living organisms, they will prepare the food by their own. Such living organisms we can call it as autotrophic plants. And example, green plants. Okay, heterotrophic plants means what? Those living organisms, they will depend food for other living organisms or other plants. Such living organisms we can call it as heterotrophic plants. Okay, then after that we have studied detailed way about that how autotrophic plants are prepare the food. Okay, that we have studied about that. Okay, then after completion of detailed way of the photosynthesis process, that means how prepare the food, then we move on to the heterotrophic plants. Then we understand what is heterotrophic plants. Then we understand about classification of heterotrophic plants and examples we have seen that. Then after that we have seen that how we need to increase that soil fertility in the soil. So that also we have discussed. So hopefully everyone is understand the concept of nutrition in plants chapter. So thank you very much. If you have any doubts or any queries related to this particular chapter, you can contact me. Okay, so I am going to be explain that whatever the doubts or queries, you can contact my personal number, okay, or in WhatsApp group. You can put on your queries if you are not understand any concept, any doubts or any questions or whatever. Okay, so please you can contact and you can ask that. Thank you so much.